Welcome, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is no stranger to On Point Talk. She is a New York Times bestselling author. She is a licensed psychologist and an ordained minister, and has a new radio talk show on Sirius XM. She's none other than Dr. Robin Smith. We welcome her back to the OPT Network. Dr. Robin, good morning and welcome back.
Good morning, and it feels good to be back. It's been a lot has happened since you and I were looking at each other. We were still screen to screen, but that's been probably about 18 months ago. And the world has turned upside down and right side up and upside down again. And we've, many of us have been doing that somersault, that kind of whiplash with it. So it is good to be with you in this moment.
Absolutely. A lot has happened in your own life as we talk about things that have turned upside down. And before we started on air, I asked you about your stability and all of the challenges that you had in your life. And I asked you how you dealt with the car accidents and the things that have happened in your life, and then the re-emergence of yourself, I guess.
Yeah. I love the question. It has been a journey and it has not been easy. But I will say this, what has made it worth me and worth everything that it took was the fact that I did the work that I have encouraged and coached and been the shepherd and the midwife and the doctor for other people to do. And so this was my season to go inward and take time to heal all that was asking for attention, not for someone else to heal me, not for someone else to restore me, not for someone else to build me up. But, there's that gospel song that says sometimes you've got to encourage yourself. And that's easier said than done. But there is something about the fortitude of making friends with myself. Yeah. So it's been a very, very powerful time, season of leaning in, not away from what was overwhelming or scary. But leaning in and listening, listening really closely to what my own longings were, what my own desires were, what the broken places were in me, and realizing that often, and we don't know this is the good news for your viewers and listeners this morning, is that it is the broken places, if we tend to them, that can become our flotation device back to the solid land of living a life that is worthy of us.
So let's talk about the broken places, because a lot of times people have broken places, but really don't know how to attend to them. So how do you start?
By telling the truth. When someone says, and telling the truth to yourself, not necessarily to someone else. Everyone doesn't deserve your truth. Everyone doesn't deserve all the details of your life or mine. But what becomes dangerous is when we have, as Paul Laurence Dunbar said, we wear the mask that grins and lies. And part of that, the danger in that, is we can begin to believe that mask wearing. We've been wearing masks for the last almost 2 years.
Literally.
Yeah, literally. And we needed those masks. I know people from all over the country are listening to you all over the world and watching me. But the truth of the matter is those masks around the pandemic and the variant, the COVID-19, the Delta variant, and now Omicron, and whatever else is to come, those masks, regardless of what people think, kept us safe. And we need to be wearing masks when we're unsure either of ourselves or someone else, physical mask. But I'm talking about the emotional masks, the spiritual masks that when people either went to church, now people are attending, virtual services often, but you ask someone, how are you? And they say, I'm blessed and highly favored. It's not that they're not blessed, and it's not that they're not highly favored, but what they've left out is I'm blessed because I'm still here, but my life feels really messy right about now. My marriage feels messy. My parenting feels messy. My money is a mess. And so there is something about telling the truth to yourself and then finding someone, some worthy, safe vault where you can strip down emotionally and financially and spiritually and relationally and tell someone, ouch, I hurt. Ouch, I don't feel good about myself. Ouch, I wear a mask and I say all of these big things about my faith or about my parenting, but the truth of the matter is I feel lost and very far from being found. And so that's where we start. We start with the truth.
Okay, so you tell yourself and maybe someone that you can trust your truth, whatever that is. And you gave a litany of ways and spaces where people are feeling broken. And after the first wave of the pandemic, when people were really sheltered in together, a lot of marriages struggled. A lot of marriages have ended subsequently after that. And I don't think it was necessarily COVID. It was probably many things. But I was having a conversation with a friend this morning, and we were talking about long-term marriages 20 and 25 and 30 and 35 years that are ending. When you begin to tell yourself that truth, and the truth is not necessarily what you've always lived, because you've worn the mask and you've put on Facebook and social media what you wanted people to see. How then do you begin to unpack that so that you don't unpack your whole life?
Yeah. It's a wonderful and a courageous question for any of us to ask. How do we really not just tell the truth, but then begin to live it? What does that look like for long-term? And it's not just long-term marriages and partnerships. It's also long-term friendships. It's also long-term family connections where, we're a ride or die family. And then COVID happened, and Brother George Floyd was murdered, along with many others, unfortunately, Black men.
Right.
And it shook like an earthquake will shake, so an earthquake, and we just, had these terrible tornadoes, can take life, but that life that is still standing after an earthquake, after a tornado, it is shaken and it is fractured and it is scary. And also it has survived. And so there is a part of coming to terms with after the world has been shaken up. What is left that is true? So maybe we were a ride or die family, but we weren't actually nice to each other. Maybe we were a jealous family. So we hung together, but we hung together less out of support and more out of competition, that we wanted to always be in the know. And so I think there is a part of, when you ask the question, how does someone tell the truth and unpack what's necessary without finding themselves feeling that they have nothing left that is real? One of the things I invite people, but particularly women, to do right here, right now, as they are with us, is instead of blaming yourself for what you wasted, what you should have known, shouldn't have taken, shouldn't have put up with, shouldn't have, worn the mask that grins and lies. The truth of the matter is that's how we've been socialized as women, to fake it till you make it. And if you never make it, just keep faking it. And so there is a part of deep compassion to realize how we've been socialized as women to abandon ourselves for the sake of everything and everyone except the self. So abandon yourself and say you're a great parent. Now you're on empty and you're depleted, but we wear even our depletion as a badge of honor. I listen to women, family members and friends and people where I'm giving talks, and they walk in talking about, girl, I'm so tired.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't really hear, how come we're always so tired?
Right.
Because it is this, oh, I know, I'm so tired too, and then we give this litany of all of the things that we are doing to be exhausted, as if somehow the abandonment of the self is, gives us a crown. And so I have a phrase called crown yourself. And it's a very different thing. Instead of looking to someone else to crown you, and that depletion is not your crown, but self-care becomes your crown. That's something we don't hear as women, and particularly as Black women. I mean, just run yourself in the ground, and your crown you'll get in heaven.
And why is it that Black women, especially out of, most other ethnic groups, why have we accepted that as our norm?
Well, there's something, people sometimes hate to hear this still in 2021, almost 2022. There's something called slavery. And there is something that happened particularly to Black women, where Black women were set aside, not as a prize, but as a possession to take care of everyone. That means we were nursing other people's babies. I mean, some people they're like, is that true? I said, yeah, no, it is true that we were nursing, putting other people's children to our breasts and nursing other people's children. We were raising other people's children. That's why we see some of these relationships where there have been white families and the children are so devoted to the Black caretaker because the Black caretaker was the nurturer. What we did not see in slavery, and we often still don't see it now, is where was the Black woman individualized, and that she was entitled to pleasure or to desires or to rest because she's tired. And so, particularly for Black women, we have not had the examples of our mothers and our grandmothers and our great grandmothers saying, when you're tired, sweetheart, sit down. Now, what we hear is, you'll be okay. You got to take care of your family. Those kids need you. Your man, he's depending on you. So we've not heard the permission that I'm trying to unleash on the streets right now, particularly for Black women, that it is our divine birthright, and it is also our divine responsibility to take care of ourselves first.
Is it resonating? Are we coming into self-care? Because we can talk about self-care And it's become a great catchphrase, but are we really beginning to not only just talk about, but understand what does that mean?
Yeah, I'm seeing in the work that I'm doing, and I'm in 2022 going to be rolling out more of ways that women and Black women in particular can practice. Because, see, self care, just so we understand, it is a spiritual practice. It's a spiritual practice to take care of the self. It is spiritually dangerous to neglect the self. And so, are we in droves changing our ways? Not yet, but we're beginning to understand that giving ourselves away was not only overrated, but ultimately it has caused an implosion of the self. It doesn't work and no one wins. And so it's a new message. And you're right, not, go get your nails done
Right.
and get a massage. I mean, nothing wrong with that. That's
Right.
good too.
Right.
But I'm talking about telling people who you live with, no.
Right.
No, not now. No, maybe not ever, but certainly no, not now.
Right.
And so this is not about your nails. This is not something you can pay for that
Right.
way. This
Right.
is something that requires a spiritual muscle, an emotional muscle to get developed, that you can look at your loved ones and see that they have needs and realize that it is not your job
Right.
to satisfy their needs and ignore yourself.
And I think that when you frame it in the spiritual realm and knowing that self-care is taking care of your spirit, your soul, as well as your body, then it will begin to resonate. Because I think that, and we talk about Black women and our plight, but it is womanhood, I think, in totality, that we have wanted to be all to everything and everybody. And so if
Except ourselves.
except ourselves.
Except ourselves.
And my uncle would say, a newism, we call it, it's an inside job. And many of us are not doing the work of the inside, also creating mental health issues that have really been untouched. Talk a little bit about how that inside affects our mental wellness.
It's interesting. I also, like your uncle, talk about an inside job, that the transformation, the reformation has to happen from the inside out. This can't be that you pretty the outside.
Right.
The Ethiopian proverb says that he who conceals his disease cannot expect to be cured. So he or she who covers up that which is wrong, broken, hurt, cannot expect to be cured. And so when we talk about depression, anxiety, isolation, unfortunately, in the African American community, but certainly also with women as a whole, those, I wouldn't even call it, I mean, they are diagnoses, but I don't even want to talk about them as diagnoses. What I want to talk about is the ways in which we have carried burden. We have carried pain. We have carried sadness. And we have carried not only our pain, but we have carried it for our families. We have carried it and said, well, they can't bear it, but I can. And so it has then converted itself into clinical depression, into anxiety that has women often over or under eating, not exercising, not moving. I have something called the 3 B's: move your body, move your brain, move your burden. Move your body, because so often when we are depressed, anxious, scared, angry, hear me, as people are angry, bitter, resentful, and denying it, our bodies hold all of that in. And so our bodies manifest, whether it is, with sickness or headaches or irritable bowel syndrome. I mean, our stomachs are all twisted and turned because we're ingesting that toxin, that emotional toxin, and not acknowledging this is too much for me. I can't do this. And actually, maybe I could do it. I don't want to do it anymore. So having the permission to do that requires that we begin to move our body. So people who are with us right now, if they're sitting in a chair, maybe stand up. If you're standing, sit down. I mean, move your body. Remind yourself that when you're taking the trash out, that you are beginning to tend to your body because you're walking from your house or your apartment down the hall, beginning to move your body that has housed a lot of your stress. Move your brain. Why? Because our brains hold trauma and we rehearse trauma. So when things happen to us that were painful, we have to find the balance between retelling the story, because we need to tell the story. Part of how we heal is from telling the story. But if we keep telling that same story of trauma, we actually paint ourselves into the corner of a room and don't realize that there is a world outside of that traumatic moment. So to move our brain is to move it from the place of being frozen around what harmed us or whom we harmed, or some of both, and to brainwash. We think of brainwashing as negative, but there's good brainwashing. There is stuff that we've been conditioned to as women that we have attached ourselves to, that we need to wash our brains of that thought. And then lastly, that helps us move the burden. I didn't say that the burden goes away, but if I'm moving my body and I am moving my brain, I'm moving my thoughts, I'm not allowing my thoughts to have dominion, because what I focus on is what grows. What grows has dominion. So I have to redirect where my thoughts are so that I can do what? Move that burden. Move that burden.
And so with that said, all of those are nuggets for people who are listening and watching. But we know that people are not running, maybe now after the pandemic, running for the psychologists, for the Dr. Robins of the world. How do we encourage people that sometimes you just have to have an objective ear to hear you so that you can work through the things that have ailed you for many of us a lifetime?
Yeah. It's interesting about therapy and what is therapy. I always say to people that what therapy is at its best is it's actually overhearing the conversation that you've been having with yourself all your life.
Wow.
But doing it in an environment where you're not isolated. So you don't feel like you're talking to yourself. You don't feel like you're talking to the wall, but you feel like you're talking to your open heart, receiving herself. And so that's what therapy really is. It's that I get to overhear and you get to overhear, and everyone that's listening right now, they get to overhear the conversation that they've really been having with themselves all of their lives. And it finally has a safe place to be validated, to be embraced, and to be given direction about how you can take where you were and now use it to go forward.
Many years ago when you and I first started talking, I talked to you about my truth and telling my truth. And I thought, okay, I've told my truth. And you said to me, your truth is not something that you just tell one time. Your truth is a lifelong journey. You know, how do you begin to tell people how to unpack that? Because in some moments you feel liberated to tell your truth. And if you're not careful, you'll go back into that voicelessness of right where you were.
Yeah. I have a prescription that I use for my own life and my own journey. It's called Wake Up, Show Up, Grow Up, Rise Up. And the wake up moment is that moment that we recognize that something is off, that something is needing attention. So that wake up moment is, what is the moment right here, right now, that we are being ushered in to address. And wake up really is about acknowledgement. Show up, I say it's reporting for active duty in our own lives. I mean, the fantasy that things are going to get better, but somebody else is going to do the work. I get that fantasy. I've had that fantasy, but that's not how it works. That I have to report for active duty in my own life, I have to show up. Really show up. And what does that mean? It means like a grown-up. So the wake up, show up, grow up is when I was a child, the Bible says I thought as a child and I acted like a child and I was a child. When I became an adult, I put away childish things. And that doesn't mean this has nothing to do with age. It has to do with the maturity that comes from recognizing that it is an inside job. So that if something is broken and I'm unhappy with something, the first place I want to go, not in blame, but in curiosity, is to myself. Like, how did I end up in a job that is so unsatisfying for so long? How did I end up with an airbrush smile that actually has no substance behind it? So not to blame the self, but to wake up to the truth, to show up for active duty, to grow up in terms of what is my responsibility and what can I do? And the rise up is that moment of, how do I ascend? And this goes to your question, how do I live into my truth? Well, a part of that is to recognize, and what I said to you then, I believe even more so now, that our truth is ever unfolding, as is our deliverance. So when people say to me, I've been delivered from drugs, I've been delivered from, hate, I don't know. I say, okay, you mean for the moment? And they look like, no, I'm never doing drugs again. I'm never going to be, like raging the way I said, okay, well, that's kind of not how it works. How it works is that in this moment, this is my truth. Like I feel free or I feel enraged in this moment. And part of the journey of waking up and showing up and growing up and rising up is recognizing that this is not a static life we are in. We could be feeling so free and drive by something that reminds us of something or someone, and all of a sudden our joy seems to drain away. So does it mean that our joy wasn't real? No, it just means that in each moment, we have to claim anew what is true in that moment and work with the truth of that moment. And the truth of that moment, not the fantasy of the moment, but the truth of that moment, to guide and to shepherd us to create the life and live the life that we really desire and deserve to live. I mean, there is no free lunch here.
Right.
This is really about facing with compassion, with full-hearted compassion and accountability, who I am, who it is I want to be, who I'm not, and to be kind and supportive and compassionate, but to stay in the truth.
Now, that truth is something that has been a motif throughout this whole conversation. And truth is truth. It shouldn't equivocate. But a lot of people have problems with the truth because my truth is the way that I see it. But I want to talk about real truth, not what I want it to be or what I need it to be, but what it really is.
Well, I think the issue is to not get stuck in a power struggle with someone about how they see the world. And because we can waste a lot of time trying to get someone to see
Our
our
way.
truth.
Right.
Right. And in doing that, we give a lot of our power up. Instead of deciding that I'm clear about what it is I know about me. And I've offered that in dialogue with someone else, but to not get entrenched in an ego fight.
That's good.
With someone about being right, about how you see the world. It's like, do you care enough, whoever is listening or watching, and do you know enough about yourself to not need to convince other people about your truth, but to live in your truth and let that be enough?
That's powerful. Now, Dr. Robin, you've got a new radio show on a lighter note, and we're super, super excited for you. Congratulations on that. Tell us about it.
I am so excited. I am back on Sirius XM, channel 126. It's the Dr. Robin Show.
Mm-hmm.
It's every Sunday at 11 a.m. in the East, and it reruns at 7 p.m. in the East on Sundays. I am interviewing celebrities but everyone that's coming. I mean, Courtney B. Vance was my first guest, and I've had Tina Lifford from Queen Sugar, and Alexander McLean. He is an incredible British lawyer who has taken the law in England and is helping prisoners become attorneys.
Wow.
Inside of the prison system. So I've interviewed all kinds of really interesting people, but what has been most impactful is that I'm not talking with them about, not that I don't talk about their latest projects, but they are talking about their own wake up moment, their own show up moment, their own grow up moment, their own rise up moment. And so we are hearing from these great minds and great lives, how they are navigating what matters, how they manage their own pain, how they have found strength in times of great hardship and suffering. So it's a wonderful, inspiring platform for me and for all of the guests to come and breathe and live the truth. I mean, to unmask ourselves emotionally and spiritually and delve deep with curiosity into the lives of these great people and minds and thinkers. So I look forward to having people come join me again on Sundays at 11 a.m. in the East on Sirius XM channel 126, and it's the Dr. Robin Show.
Wow. And so, Dr. Robin, for you, a resident therapist on the Oprah Winfrey Show for many years, New York Times bestseller, doctor, coach, friend, what does this season mean for you coming back around really full circle?
It means for me that if we do the work, the inside job work, and don't try and, put the cake in the oven and keep opening the oven door every 5 minutes to see whether or not the cake is starting to rise, that the inside work really pays off, and there is great freedom and abundance when we really do our own work. So that's what this season is about for me. And it's about inviting other people to partner with me as they do their own work to get free.
Powerful. Dr. Robin, every time we have a conversation, you bring such light, such compassion, and such love to each and every conversation. May God continue to bless the work of your hands and your mouth and everything that He has for you to go out into the world and do. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me and allowing me to be with you again in your audience. Be well. God bless you.
Indeed. Dr. Robin Smith has been our guest this morning, everybody. Stay on point. We're back right after this.